Tribune podcast. This podcast will be one of the more difficult to follow. I'm afraid I'll try to make it as accessible as I can. I'll go on explaining a certain dictum that in Latin goes like this: Diversum est esse et id quod est. The being and that which is are different. This is a dictum made by Thomas Aquinas, but it covers a far more ground than purely and simply Thomas Aquinas' works. This is one of the dictums of classical metaphysics with a decidedly Christian spin, as we shall, I hope, see. Now, I love this dictum. I love this sentence. One of the reasons why I love it is because analytical so-called philosophers hate it, or at least they should hate it, because it is everything. It is everything they find wrong with philosophy. It's a metaphysical sentence, and it is expression of metaphysical principle, and moreover it's an expression of metaphysical principle that takes something very common as a verb to be and differentiates its two senses in a way that it displays something fundamental about the existence in general. Maybe not the right word to use, existence. You'll see why, I think. The world, let's say. It signifies, in a word, that being, things like being, like difference, like essence, like individual difference between being and beingness, difference between being and essence, difference between singular thing and the generality of things. It matters. It matters so much that there is a science about it, and that science, metaphysics, which was called in Middle Ages of Thomas Aquinas scientia transcendens, according to the teaching of transcendentals, is necessary here, and I want to erase it. The other reason why they would hate it is because it is very concise. It is not vague. I'll give you an example. One Croatian professor emeritus, very much acclaimed among conservatives here, of analytical persuasion and quite successful, had quite a successful career, just, let's say, recently put the sentence up, quoted Nietzsche or Conan, I don't know, but it's originally Nietzsche's sentence: what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And then he's in his late age in life astonished that somebody can take this seriously. It's so vague, namely, what doesn't kill you can make you feeble, and so on and so forth. He would not be able to do this kind of blasé reaction with the dictum Diversum est esse et quid est, because he would have to write a book, or at least article-length thesis to refute it. And refutation is usually that it doesn't signify nothing. You cannot point out where that being is. Moreover, it's a participle of a verb, so those things don't exist. Greeks were a little kooky, where they turn the abstract words into abstract things, and so on and so forth. Come on. Okay. But I don't love this sentence just because I loathe analytical philosophy, especially because it's appropriating the word analysis in a quite inappropriate manner, and because they are making careers, as this professor I just mentioned. Those people are making careers on abolishment of philosophy. They are making careers in philosophy. So that's a no-no for me. I'm a very simple, down-to-earth, primitive guy. You can't make money from some wages, let's say. Don't make profit. You make wages and pay your way by something that you constantly try to prove does not exist. I mean, it's ludicrous. It's a deal breaker for me. Excuse me. Now, what this means? By the way, English viewers maybe remember comedian Dave Allen. This was what he would always do. Although he had a glass of water also. Never mind. This is the sentence that differentiates, or better to say, circumscribes the whole totality, let's say, the wholeness of the creature as creature. There is no being in this world, be it visible or invisible, because let us not forget, we are talking about Christian philosophy, which is not the same as Christian theology, mind you, and which always observes the world as a creature and as visible and invisible according to Credo. So this is not self-critical philosophy in a modern sense of the word, where you can put everything in question. No. Some things, by the way, you cannot really put into question. That's the trick that modern philosophy never got, or just obfuscated. But in a Christian sense, you have this additional thing. Mind you, the idea of the differentiation of being an act of being, which this is in fact, I'll explain what this means. For this, you don't need a revelation strictly for the logic of this. This is the way to observe the existence of origin or of eternity and such things without them being revealed to you in a strict manner of scripture as it is in Christianity. So this is subordinated. The order of truth, as Aquinas would say, which is subordinated to the order of revealed things, because you are much better off knowing that God is Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit than knowing that God is, or angels is. Angels are. Angels are very important in this context. One more reason why I have to stress this is Christian philosophy. Now, first, let's start from the second part of the sentence, which is a being, let's say, maybe singular, but not only singular. I am being, in the sense of ens in Latin, on, to own. Let's leave the particle, not to confuse English listeners. Because in Greek it can refer to singular and not something general. I'm just being. Nothing fancy. But there is also a way to talk about being in general, ens universalis. And this ens universalis is also differentiated from that being, from the first part of the sentence, as a translation of Latin essse. And the real technical term that Thomas Aquinas uses for esse is actus essendi, the act of being. Act of being is always differentiated in any created being. This is his main principle, main thesis, and everything stems or pours out from it as from the source of light. This signifies finitude in a very specific sense. It doesn't signify finitude as we are wont to assume in temporal sense, that you have, that every being has a certain time allotted to its existence and then it ceases to exist. That's what, for instance, Heidegger would want you to think, that being in any sense of the word is finite. This is nonsense. This is not nonsense because as analytical philosophers would say you cannot even talk about being with any sense, but because when you use things as universal qualifiers, as universal being, as the first cause, first origin, eternity or infinitude come into play necessarily. They are natural to these terms. You can say that they are meaningless, but logically, if you only take them as concepts, this kind of stems from them. And Heidegger tries to prevent this by deconstructing, in fact, destroying. He would call it phenomenological destruction in his early phase. What it is, in fact, is deconstruction. It's a later term invented by some people inspired by him. So it ends up deconstructing grammar, because our grammar also naturally, as our logic implies these things. No, this is a finitude of another kind. This is a finitude which is opposite of eternity. And eternity means far more than infinite time. Eternity is a quality of being in which being and that which it is one, in a sense that they are one and the same, with no distinction. Save maybe intentional distinction, as they said in the scholastics, but we'll leave that aside because that would take us too far afield, far too far. So, in this distinction of the actus essendi, of the act of being and being, we are in fact talking about creature. And metaphysics is a science that analyzes the creature in the light of its origin. This is kind of my definition, pre-formulation of another people's definition. But it is not, mind you, origin, it is not the analysis of the origin itself, as in you are having origin transparent to you. It is observation of the world, visible and invisible, mind you, let us not forget, in the light, that is to say, as given by the origin. And this givenness, that thing is given, that something is given to our knowledge, is expressed in Middle Ages, and Thomas Aquinas, also before, but it's very pronounced in Middle Ages, by light. Now this light is not, by the way, you have a happy Easter message from Mihai Marinescu, my friend, and from me too. This is being recorded on Easter. I don't know when will I put it up. That's the sound you hear. That's from WhatsApp. quite appropriate for the moment, I would say. Because a Catholic and Orthodox Easter are falling on the same day this year. And for those who don't know, who don't follow Kali Trivium, Miha is Romanian, he is Orthodox, I'm Catholic. Where was I? Yes, the light. The metaphor is not a literary metaphor, as in metaphor in literature. It's a symbol. It's a way this acts. It brings light, because not only visible light is light. The light of reason, of intellect, is also light. And the light of intellect is, I would say, a bit like moon. It is being lit, it is giving light. Light it gives is in fact the light of the sun reflected. Metaphor is not completely apt because in this philosophy, the light of reason is autonomous. Everything in the world is autonomous to a degree. But always in relation to the originator and giver of that autonomy. That autonomy is given. The freedom which autonomy is, as well as freedom of knowing things, is something that is given. And this is a very important distinction, because if you take, on top of my head, John Locke, he also talks about light of reason and autonomy of reason, but not as a given, at least not in this sense, and this has pretty dire consequences when observing it from the point of view of metaphysics. So what is this act of being? Act of being is what Greeks would call energeia, energy, and what we call that actuality is English, in fact, literal English translation from Greek and Latin. And I think it's pretty apt, as well as actus is very, let's say, appropriate translation of Greek energia. I say this because a lot of people who read Heidegger tend to think that Latin translations destroy the original Greek thoughts. I don't agree with that one second. In English language you do get lost in translation, but this doesn't mean that you cannot express it. Because, for instance, Heidegger went so far as to consider philosophy untranslatable from language to language, save maybe in German, because that's language of the gods. Take it as you like. I don't buy it, and never did. Anyway, so there is a certain light that is a metaphor, in a sense I just explained, of being. And this light is not identical with beings that are lit. Being lit means to exist. So everything that exists. Everything has actus, energeia. But note, I say have, possesses. Being and having are not the same. There is a being, the only being, that doesn't need this distinction is the being that doesn't have, but simply is. And that being, in view of Thomas Aquinas, is God. Everything else is creature, everything else is originated, and being originated suffers this distinction that makes it finite. Now I said it's not temporal finitude, and here is why. There are beings that are temporal infinite, that are Oh, it's such an old socks. Please. You haven't seen this. Those are angels. Angels are fundamentally important in Christian philosophy. They are not important merely as figments from theology that are brought in as outside explanatory deus ex machina. No, they are essential for this, because they display the more perfect form of existence than humans are, because they are not conditioned by matter. Now, human being is a composite, as they would say in this crude Latin over there, because when you say composite, you have an impression of Lego cubes or something. This is not what they mean by this. Greeks would find probably better word, and I had better words, but let's leave it at that. Meaning is kosher, in my opinion. Meaning is, namely, that the human is, as his definition goes, zon logonehon, animal or living being endowed with intellect, or with speech, and everything that comes with intellect. Where animality is its genera, and intellectus or logos is its species. Now, this composite cannot be separated apart. You have to have both. So when we say essence of man, we imply body, everything that comes with the body, and the form of the body, which is soul, as you perhaps know if you're following me, a form is active principle. It's an energy that informs something in this world, visible world, something material, making it this concrete thing, this actual thing. So the act of actus esse, this energia, this act of being, comes from form. What makes man a man is intellectus, because from it, man becomes him or her. In fact, this is because man is gendered being, but we call him a man first for some for some reason. But let's leave it at that. Feminists don't like that one bit, as we all know. So form is where the act comes from, whereas the matter, which is signified by genera, the animality, is what gets in form. Now, animality is form in itself. If you start to look at lower level of what informs cruder, non-living matter, life informs it to be a living matter, a body, and so on. In human being, genera is present in all aspects of human being. It is ever present. So everything in me is animal, but in implicated way, in potential way. And this potentiality is actualized in a certain manner to make me this playgirl centerfold body by form, a human form, going more into specific human form of this certain person, because I'm a person. I'm not what, I'm who. But this is going to different level of analysis, which even brings us out of metaphysics. Metaphysics has its scope. It's It's very important to observe it, because it's very easy to lose your way in it. So my act of being is my qualified possession, not the possession I have for all eternity, but the possession, since we are talking about Christian philosophy, that I will possess forever, but not as something I have created or given to myself, because I cannot create. Only one being can create, because creation, the idea of creation in Christianity, is exclusively creation from nothing. Everything we call creation, for instance, when you conceive a child or you make a work of art, it is not creation strictly speaking. It is not creation in absolute sense, but secundum quid, in relation to something, in a certain manner. And as such, it is a kind of imitation of creation, but not creation itself. And this is very important to remember, because in our day and age, people talk about creativity a lot, taking it as a kind of prime example of humanity. Now it's just a word, but I always get a sense that they really mean that we human beings create, that we are pinnacle, relative pinnacle, since we, according to contemporary, modern, but now postmodern, posthuman way of thinking, we evolved. We are evolved, not evolved animals, I would say evolved matter, more like. There is no such assumption here. So the very essence comes from above, as you see. And now, excuse me, this is not from smoking. I have a sore throat. This distinction has some very interesting implication aside from those I already laid out. One of them is, for instance, distinction between being and essence, being in the sense of ens, being in the sense of me and my essence. I participate in my essence, and my essence is present in me as an actual being. So sometimes interprets lost their way, thinking that essence is merely a possibility that is actualized by this act of being. This is not the case. This is case maybe in qualified sense. In absolute sense, essence is also actuality, because it is actualized by its very existence. The reason, the notion that the act of existence and existence itself are distinct, that doesn't mean that they are separate, that they exist one before other or one after other, or kind of two things that come together. This is not their principles, and principles can be present simultaneously, and this is the case, in fact. Now, think about the being that doesn't have body, not having something in this philosophy means being more powerful. It's very interesting and very consequent and logical. So what is informed in this being? What is being actualized? What essence is being actualized in this being? Not matter, something else. Well, the angel is a created being in which act of being is contracted and limited by its power. The power is the potentiality, the pure power, the pure potency, not material, but power, the ability to act, is what is limited by energeia. And this is, in Thomas Aquinas' terminology, their power to do good is limited by their purpose, the reason why they are created, and every separate angel has his domain, how far he can go with knowing, with loving, with doing such things. This is what what limits him. So he is also limited. He can exist. He doesn't exist from all eternity because he's created, obviously. He's originated. And he nevertheless must exist in a hierarchy of being, as something that is an effect of a cause. And from him, as well as from man, and from the world in general, we can, by analysis, by untying of the knot of this difference that exists in us, go up to the origin and realize that as was said by at the battle in heaven, Mikael, who is like the Lord. This is the origin. I'm speaking philosophically, I'm not speaking scripturally, but this is, in a sense, what it amounts to, the anatomy of logic behind the natural ordering of the mind. The mind is ordered towards God, towards the light that gives it light. If you stand in the light, you will more at one point realize that you are not its soul, you are not its unconditional possessor. So what is this being that is not, in which there is this no distinction of essence and existence? Excuse me, factus essendi and being. Well, if we take, for instance, that there is no difference between actual color and act of being of color, what we get is a singular color, let's call it white, which we would call whiteness. But if this was so, there would be no white things. You know why? Because they would be all, in a way, limiting this whiteness, its act of being, because there are other acts of being. Even if the act of being is provided to every single white being by whiteness itself. Because participation is a partial existence, or having the same being partially, the being that other being has it by its essence. So every white being is white according to whiteness. Now someone may already recognize what this means. This is Platonism. Thomas Aquinas does not reject Platonism, he's very platonically inclined. What he rejects here is that, because I just described the idea, Platonic idea of whiteness, rejects that something that is truly absolute, as such that its existence, its energia, is not limited by any kind of possibility or any kind of lack, can be only one. It cannot be participated. By the way, you have this in Platonism also. Hen is unparticipable, this one of Platonists. So it's not that different as it may seem at first, and by only reading his words, because he haven't had all the texts before him. to really criticize Platonism as it is, but he had a lot of texts, other texts that were fusing Aristotle with Platonic philosophy, which is normal for Platonism. So his Aristotelian way of thinking is Platonized. It's not peripatetic Aristotelianism. So there can be only one absolute. That's what I mean. You have two absolutes, they limit one another. There can be only one such being. What you get here is a demonstration of God's existence, which is not very famous. Most famous demonstrations, the ways of proving God's existence in Thomas Aquinas are famous 5 ways from movement, from finality, and so on and so forth, which are partly Aristotelian, partly his, and never mind. This one is different, and it's rarely taken as a proof, as a philosophical, metaphysical proof of God's existence, but as a matter of fact, it is. And it runs deeper because it's not coming from so much from how should I put it? Not from externality, because those other proofs from, for instance, from first mover, and so they are also that they also observe intrinsic qualities of beings. But this is something fundamental. This is the very existence, not acting existence as movement, process, and finality, but existence itself in its purest form indicates to singular being that is unoriginated. Why unoriginated? This is very important, because the being that is perfect in this sense cannot have something before itself, something more perfect or more actual, more with more energy. This is infinity of being. This is the, as is said, I think, by not John Chrysostom, Gregor Nazianzes, Pelagos Tesousia, Pučina Bitka, the open sea of being. This is God. You cannot have two of those. Mediterranean, Adriatic God, Mediterranean, Baltic, that's stupid, it's infinity of being. So it doesn't have originator, it has no origin. You know why I say this? Because today you have this idea of causa sui. It's not from today, but it's very ingrained in philosophy via Spinoza, but he was not first to come out with it. That God is somehow cause of himself. This is very dangerous idea. Not only because it is heretical, I leave that to priests. It's metaphysically dangerous because it puts this duality in God. First, it's absurd, but there were thinkers like Jakob Böhme, for instance, like Hegel, like Schelling, like everybody who talked about God, except modern philosophers, except those that were in the Catholic Church and under the dogma, simply were not allowed to say something like this, but modernity pushes you to think in this manner. There is no self-caused being. If you assume that God caused himself, then you have, what you get, you have evil and good, for instance. You have these opposites of male and female. You get this all in God. I talked and wrote about this in other places. I will in the future. I'm closing to my 45 minutes limit. I'll have to leave it at that, but have it in mind. This is very important. This is not Spinoza. And this means, and this is also very important, that naturally thinking has a termination point. Infinite questions do not apply. This idea that philosophy is infinite questioning, like when child asks you, why is this, whenever you give an answer, it finds, he or she finds another answer, and so infinity. And then it's praised like, wow, let's be like children. Yeah, like, it's complete crap. This is at most 200 years old mentality. Originally, especially thinkers with metaphysical bent, and most of them were like that in antiquity and Middle Ages, and Renaissance, a little later. This does not apply. Philosophy provides answers. If it doesn't provide answers, what's the use of it? You can then you can become analytical philosopher, bust your ass, writing books, holding lectures, making money, trying to prove that the thing you are, that your profession does not exist. Why I would rather die than do something like that? It's better to do any kind of menial job or nothing job than doing something like that. That's preposterous. So, as I usually do, I made a full circle from the jab at people I don't like, back to the jab to the people I don't like. Anyway, let's call it a quits. I think this was sufficiently comprehensive. It's a very difficult subject, I know, and once more belatedly happy Easter from me, and I'll extend Michai's greetings without asking for his consent, like I care about his consent. Thank you very much.